So I'm back for a third and most likely final video tonight, but I thought I would do one more George Harrison review. And so we are in a new decade, and George's first album of that decade from June 1st of 1981. It is Somewhere in England, and the album did pretty well for him. It got to number 11 in the United States, got to number 13 in the UK, which is good for George because his last three or four albums hadn't done very well at all in England chart-wise. So it's nice that he I think this was his best-selling album over there since probably Dark Horse or Living in the Material World. But there's the cover. When I first saw this, I thought he was laying down in the road and didn't realize that that's actually a painting that he's standing in front of, and there he is walking by the painting. So by some guy. I think the painting is called Somewhere in England. I could be wrong, but some guy painted that in the 60s. And inside you've got inner sleeve with lyrics, more lyrics and information. George looking like the guy in the horror movie Hellraiser. So I'm not sure what he's up to there. Some kind of acupuncture treatment. So yeah, this is 1981. I still loved all the 60s bands, the Beatles, the Kinks, the Doors, Yardbirds, Rolling Stones, Who, played all that stuff, loved it, but it was also a time from this 79 to 82 roughly when there was just so much new, fresh, exciting, fun music and bands coming out that I was getting into a lot of new music and enjoying that. And excuse me. So George Harrison, for a short time though, I still loved the Beatles and I still loved some of his earlier solo work. Was just sort of a little long in the tooth to my tastes, and just sort of out of step with things. Which now I can kind of appreciate that, and I give him kudos for doing what he wanted to do instead of giving in and following trends and so forth. But at the time back then when I was 16, 17, whatever, I was more interested in The Clash and Elvis Costello and the Sex Pistols and the Jam and all sorts of other fun stuff going on that harkened back to the 60s excitement of the 60s music more so than things like this. So, and also a couple of the songs I heard from this I really didn't like, so I just assumed the rest of the album would be equally as bad. The reviews I read on this were that it was a pretty bad album, so I didn't buy this at the time. I didn't get it for years afterward, as a matter of fact. But when I finally did, I think it's better than Extra Texture, and I think it's basically a nice, okay album. It's definitely not one of his best, and it's hardly essential, but it does have its moments. So let's go ahead and get into it. Side 1, Song 1, Blood from a Clone, which is funny because given that George was from mid-late 70s on was pretty dismissive of any new trends in music, disco, punk, new wave, and later into the 90s and so forth. Didn't follow stuff, just sort of did what he wanted and didn't seem to be too influenced by that stuff. But Blood from the Clone, to me, sounds almost like a new wave song. I could see Devo having covered this song, and I really like it. I think it's very prescient for the times because it talks about how the music industry, which at that time when rock and roll was still alive and thriving and exciting, but things were starting to consolidate at that point, and the sort of corporate takeover of the record labels and radio and MTV, which was just about to start, but would be ruined within 2 or 3 years of starting, and just how it was all about. It was becoming more and more all about image and product instead of good music. Which, and if he thought that was the case in 1981 and it was sort of starting to go that way, can imagine what he would think of music nowadays when it's a million times worse. But it's very insightful to listen to that song now when you consider what happened to music from 1981 to now. Anyway, it's a fun song. It's a good song. I like the line, "I thought we freed us from the mundane." I think he might be thinking about the Beatles when he sang that line. Maybe not. But one of my favorite songs on the album, I give it an 8.5. Second song is "Unconsciousness Rules," which is sort of a grab bag of 50s rock and roll, rockabilly, sort of a country song. Uh, Fun song. It says a lot about the music, homogenization of music that was, like I said, just sort of getting started then, but nothing near what it is nowadays. And you think about it, it also says a lot about us today politically, just the divisiveness in the country that's, with blame on both sides, left and the right. And so, sort of, again, like Blood from a Clone, just sort of looking into the future and calling it right. Not as good as Blood from a Clone, but it's a pretty good song. I give it a 6 for Unconsciousness Rules. Next song is Life Itself, which is one of George's more spiritual songs in a long time at this point, or directly religious songs. Sort of God as Buddha and Jesus and so forth, as all of them being God and all one. Um, it's a pretty song. It's a nice, affecting song. I give it a 6. Not much to say about that. And then we come to the song that was the hit off the album. Everyone knows. And yeah, I can't stand this song. Never could. So all these years ago, it's just awful. It sounds like the theme song to some stupid kid show, Barney the Ninja Turtle show or something like that. Just the namby-pamby, lame music. And I don't fault that his heart was in the right place. And, it's got the big excitement back then was that Ringo and Paul are on it. And then when you finally heard the song, you're just like, oh, geez, George, God, it's just bad. Uh, I, I give it a 3, and only because, like I said, the sentiment and his heart's in the right place. But God, that's an awful song. And this originally started off was supposed to be a song for Ringo, which would have been on the Stop and Smell the Roses album if Ringo had recorded it. But he didn't, and so George had it sitting around, and then, unfortunately, what happened with John, and he changed the lyrics around to sort of fit that. But, um, I know he meant well, like I said, but I can just see John wherever he was hearing that thing and probably going out of bloody hell and running to the bathroom to Ralph up. It's just, I never did like the song. It's just a cheesy piece of crap. Anyway, so that gets a 3. But things get a little better with the. I think that's the last song on side 1 is Baltimore Oriole, which is an old Hoagie Carmichael song. Worth looking up the original Carmichael version on YouTube because that's really nice too. But it's just sort of a smoky jazz ballad from the 40s. George does a good job of covering it. He was always a fan of Carmichael. George's version is fun. It's nice. I'm going to give it an 8.5. So after the awfulness of all these years ago, he ends side 1 on an up note. And that's the first of 2 Carmichael covers on this album. So we go to side 2, which opens with a song called Teardrops, which was one of those with the whole story of the Warner Brothers saying his first album he turned in wasn't commercial enough and go write some hits. So he ran back and tried to tailor-make a hit just to shut the executives up and keep them happy, which is Teardrops. It's breezy and catchy, but it's also a pretty cheesy song. The funny thing is, and it didn't go anywhere chart-wise or anything, but the funny thing is that in the later half of the 80s, 85 on, cheesy, crappy music like this would be the sort of stuff that was all over the radio and topping the charts and all over MTV. So maybe if he had released this in '87 or something instead of '81, he would have had some success with it. But either way, it's not a good song, and it gets a 3. Second song on side 2 is That Which I Have Lost, which is fun, upbeat music. Sounds good, but with serious music, with serious lyrics about just realizing the value of what's important while you still have time. Uh, it's nice. Maybe it goes a little too long, but it's a good song. I'm going to give it a 7. Third song is The Writing on the Wall, or The Writings on the Wall. It's another kind of religious but serious song about focus on what matters in life and what's important, because life is fleeting and it's over before you know it, so don't spend your time on frivolous things and pursuits. Nice message, sort of a song. I'm going to give it a 4. Here we go with the next Carmichael cover, which is Hong Kong Blues. This one is not quite as good as Baltimore Oriole. Carmichael's original is pretty good. Kind of a Cab Calloway sounding song, but nice, but not much to it. It gets a 4.5. And the album ends with Save the World, which is sort of George's protest song about everything. You know, don't pollute, save the whales, save the trees, don't blow up atomic bombs, yada, yada, yada. Good intentions all. There's a little bit all over the place. Has some sound effects in there that sort of take away from the seriousness, I guess, of the song. His heart's in the right place, like it was with All These Years Ago, and it's a better song than All These Years Ago, I guess, because it's not as silly, but it's not a very good song. It gets a 4, and that ends the album. Pleasant enough album to put on and listen to every once in a while. There's really, I guess the only standout tracks on this would be, for me, Blood from a Clone, Baltimore Oriole, and That Which I Have Lost is okay. And that's really about it. Unconsciousness Rules is not bad. So not much of anything here. I give the album a 5 overall. It's okay. If you don't have any solo George, go buy All Things Must Pass or Wonderwall or Living in the Material World or 33 1/3 or even the George Harrison album. Save this till last and you really don't even need to buy it. It's okay. It gets a 5. And from this point on, George albums will be few and far between, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately if this was the kind of stuff he was making. But it gets better. We'll see ya.